when you are stuck and you just cannot break through, there are only two possibilities. Every language that I've learned, I've had this tipping point in some way. And the thing that I think I've done really well with my languages is that, so what am I doing wrong? Legit question. Been learning Spanish for years. I listen every day. I converse every day. It's still too fast for my comprehension to answer questions. I'm considered B1, intermediate, but I still feel like a beginner. Yes, I have more passive input, but I have active time every day, some Spanish every day, still can't have a fluent conversation, and comprehension is the worst. Like, what am I doing different that everyone else swears by? Am I just too stupid to learn? Asks at Midnight Vibes SV. You can feel the frustration in this question, right? Another question from at Satyasam108. I am learning Arabic, been learning for 2.5 years, between 1 to 2 hours every day. ChatGPT tells me that I am in between a B1 and B2, so kind of intermediate level, but it doesn't feel like it. It still feels like I'm an absolute beginner. Now look, when you are stuck and you just cannot break through, there are only two possibilities. Possibility number one is that you don't know enough stuff. Possibility number two is that you haven't yet managed to train yourself to use that stuff quickly enough in the middle of a conversation. Those are the only two things that can be happening. Either you don't know enough, or you don't yet have the facility to use that stuff quickly in conversation. Now, zooming out, it is normal to get stuck. As a beginner, you feel progress happening very quickly. Everything you learn is useful. When you learn the word for like eat, have, do, think, car, bus, train, everything you learn is useful and practical. But once you've learned all the basics, you run into this thing called the intermediate plateau. And the intermediate plateau is where progress goes up and up and up and up, and then it just stalls. And it feels like you're not improving at all. The thing is, you are improving. It's just that that improvement doesn't show itself in fluency yet, right? It's very useful to understand that this is normal. In fact, it's so normal, it's given a name, the intermediate plateau. Every learner has this, and it generally hits at around the 1 to 2 year mark. You've learned all the beginner stuff. But now at the intermediate level, what happens is you are learning words with more and more nuance, right? So rather than learning the word for, you've learned the word for eat, right? Now you're learning the word for consume or digest, I don't know, words that are kind of similar, and the nuance is going to be important in some way, but it's not practically useful for you in your day-to-day life. So you're learning a bunch of things that just aren't that important. You're fixing little bits of your grammar, which, yeah, that's kind of useful. It's important, but it doesn't actually make you feel any more fluent. So at this point, what's happening is you are learning a lot of new things, but it's just not showing up in your fluency. The big mistake is to think that you're not improving. What you got to do is keep going, keep accumulating knowledge, because that's the only way that you reach this critical mass where at some point in the future, you will be able to walk out there and you will just have at the tip of your tongue everything you need. That's the kind of high level explanation. You probably know this already. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about what I've done to fix that. Because again, I do think there are only really two things that you have to think about. Now, from this episode or from whatever other advice you might get out there on the internet, you are likely to have some ideas about, I need to do this or I need to do that in order to try and fix this problem. Get over the hump and move towards fluency where you currently feel stuck. If that's the case, it is quite important that you have a plan and you stick to it. So I've got something that can help. It's called the Language Goal Planner. It's super simple. You can print it out and set fresh goals every 90 days for your language learning. Right? This is what I plan to do. This is what I intend to do. And the goal planner will help you stick to that and then tick it off as you go. The difference between having a plan and no plan is like night and day. A lot of people treat their language learning like something they have to think about fresh every morning, but actually it's much more powerful to decide what you're going to do in advance, write it down, and then revisit that plan every day. If you do that, it's amazing how much better and more effective your studying is going to be. If you'd like a copy of this goal plan, it's completely free. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can find a link in the description. So we know why you still feel like a beginner, right? It is because you have learned everything that is practically useful for most things, and now the job is to learn 20 times as much stuff in order to be able to express yourself with real accuracy. You're in the middle of this quagmire, this intermediate plateau. But we also know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You will emerge on the other side. It might take you another year, it might take you 2 years, but you will emerge. The main thing is to understand that there's one way that you're guaranteed to fail, and that's by giving up. So the first thing is to say that you do need to keep going. This is the bit where it gets hard. It feels hard. It is hard. And the thing that separates language learners who are effective and do go on to become fluent and those who don't is literally that stick-to-itiveness. It's understanding, yeah, this is hard, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to keep it up anyway, because I understand that it is not possible for me to be putting in all this work and not to be improving in some way. All right? So let's not make the most elementary mistake of all of not actually continuing, not actually carrying on, because you're not experiencing that progress. You've got to carry on. You've got to stay positive. Now, in terms of what to do, first of all, possibility number one. Remember, there are only two possibilities. Possibility number one is you don't know enough stuff yet in order to express yourself. Possibility number two is you don't have the facility yet to actually use all of those things. So let's be real. If you don't know enough yet in the language, if you're constantly finding that you don't have the word for something, or someone says a word and you just don't know what it is, let's recognize that problem for what it is, which is fundamentally a vocabulary problem. The pathway from beginner to fairly fluent is largely one of just learning an absolute boatload of vocabulary. Like, yes, other things matter, sure, but vocabulary is key. And without vocabulary, like, you can't say anything, you can't understand anything. So if that is you, if you just know that you are struggling too much with vocabulary, don't have the word when you need it, you don't understand when it's said to you, then what you need to do is spend every waking minute reading. Because reading is the only way that you can get mass exposure to the language and have any chance of learning or even encountering enough vocabulary for you to learn the volume of words that you need, right? Word lists are not going to get you there because you won't remember them. Lessons and classes are not going to get you there because there is just not enough information that you cover. Listening is going to help, but the problem with listening is it's all happening in real time. It's not great study material. And so reading, and ideally reading that comes with audio, is what you should focus on, because that is how you're going to cover enough ground, meet enough words in context that you have a chance of learning stuff, encountering it, and remembering it. So I would have you start by reading an hour a day. Find things that you like, whether that's fiction, non-fiction, magazines, doesn't matter what it is, but just read in the language. Okay? No, none of these parallel text nonsense things where you've got the English translation. Find stuff you like that's at a level you can understand and just read, read, read. That will fix the problem gradually of you knowing enough stuff. Now, the second problem is actually having the facility to be able to use it. Now, this can happen a lot when people study for years and years and years, but they never actually speak. Reading by itself, or any kind of study by itself, is not enough to get you fluent, because what the missing piece here, what you need to practice, is what happens when you actually get in a conversation. In a conversation with somebody, what happens is you're under pressure. Things are happening in real time. You can't press the pause button on a conversation, and you've got someone looking at you, which creates this kind of social pressure, this anxiety to not look like a fool when you're speaking. So we have to also practice the things that we know. And this is why there comes a point where no matter how much study you've done, if you want to learn to speak well, what you've got to do is speak a lot. So if in the learning phase we are just reading for hours every day, because that's how we accumulate knowledge, in the speaking phase, sooner or later, you've got to speak for a long time. Now, I understand that Midnight Vibes SV says that they speak every day, they converse every day. My question is how much, right? And I would challenge you to figure out a way to go from conversing what is presumably a little bit every day to being in much more of a pressure cooker situation, right? Sitting down across the table from someone and having a conversation for an hour about something, right? If you do that every day, if you're having these rich, deep, meaningful conversations every day, and you're doing it for an hour or two a day with someone who's interested in being there and talking to you, like, it is not possible for you not to improve, right? It cannot happen, right? It's physically impossible. So I suspect that you're not having enough really involved, meaningful conversations and being challenged in that way. Now, that presents a practical challenge. How do you find the people to speak with? And this is where we have to become quite resourceful, right? Either you have to put yourself in a social situation where you have that opportunity, whether that's taking classes, signing up for some kind of course, whether that is going to language exchange websites and finding people who want to practice your language and you meet every day and you exchange your languages, whether that is going on sites like LanguaTalk and finding teachers that you pay to talk to you every day, or whether it's just going and making friends, which is kind of easy to say, harder to do, right? One way or another, it's very, very difficult for you to get to the point of being in a conversation, expressing yourself fluidly, understanding what's being said to you without hours and hours of that practice. I mean, I've had every language that I've learned, I've had this tipping point in some way. And the thing that I think I've done really well with my languages is that I've always been very proactive in going out and finding those situations in which to speak. So when I was learning Spanish, for example, I was lucky because there was a period where one of my best friends was from the Canary Islands, and we spent like 2 years living in the same place in the UK, speaking Spanish practically every day. It was just like, it was intense. And then we would hang out in the Canary Islands, and I'd go out in the evening with him and his friends, and I'd be up until 4 in the morning just with this rapid fire Spanish flying at me. And it was brutal. But that's the sort of intensity that gets you over the hump, right? Similarly, when I was learning Japanese, I didn't really have that. I didn't have the best friend in Japan. So what I did instead was I used language exchanges. I found people who wanted to learn English. We would meet, we would swap English and Japanese. And I went through a short period of doing that every single day because I remember saying to myself, I've been living in Japan for 2 years now. I'm getting really frustrated because I've been doing all this studying and I still can't speak. Like exactly what you are referencing in this question, right? And I said to myself, okay, if it's this difficult, then I just have to brute force this thing. I have to just find a way to speak as much as I can every single day. So I did that. I met the people. I arranged the language exchanges. I was speaking Japanese now for at least an hour in a focused situation every single day for weeks on end, and my Japanese just transformed overnight from that experience. And what I was getting specifically from that, because I already had the knowledge, right? What I got from that situation was the ability to take that knowledge and, for want of a better metaphor, put it on the tip of my tongue so that I had the confidence and the facility to use that language when I needed it. And that is what resulted in fluency. Likewise, when I was having these conversations back and forth, these people would say things to me, and at first I was flustered, but then after days and weeks of doing this, something clicked, and I was able to read between the lines, listen for what was being said without panicking, all these different things, right? And this is what got me to a confidence threshold where when I was speaking, I didn't need to panic and I could reach for the meaning behind what was being said, right? And it was putting myself in that situation that got me to a really strong level of conversational fluency in Japanese. You need to figure out what is your priority right now. Is it to accumulate more knowledge, or is it being honest with yourself about how much speaking you've actually got to do? I think for both of you guys, like Midnight Vibes SV and Satya-san 108, it sounds like you're being considered B1 or B2 by your language tests or the apps or whatever it is. So you probably know enough stuff. Without knowing any more about your individual situations, I would say that I want you to go out there and just figure out ways to put yourself in situations with people where you can have meaningful, long-form conversations every single day. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you might not have the exact situation where it is that you live, but this is what it takes. So, there we go. That was quite intense, but this is, having learned 8 languages myself and been through this, like I know for a fact that without finding this speaking opportunity, this sustained speaking opportunity in each of my languages, there's no way that I would have developed that facility. I would know a lot, but I wouldn't be able to use the language. So that's what I got for you today. Again, if you'd like to download my goal planner so you can actually set some accountability goals for yourself and keep yourself consistent, that is free. It's in the description. And I will see you back in the next episode of the Story Learning Podcast.